Happy Saturday, everyone! Hope everyone is having an amazing start to their day. As always, grab yourself your cup of tea because today I'm going to be spilling the tea on what happened to my face. Maybe you're a stranger and you were just curious and you clicked on the video, or maybe you're a friend and maybe you've known me for a while but didn't really know all the details of what happened to me. Well, today I invite you to join me on my journey of walking down what it's like to live with a cleft lip and palate and just some fun facts that you may not have known. So the first question you might ask is, what is a cleft lip and palate? And there are a wide variety of cleft lip and palates that you will see. And for many people, you may not even know that they actually have one because it's very subtle. And it's something that would just go from, say, their nose to their lip. And that's usually what you call a cleft lip. And any time you hear the word cleft, you can kind of think of it as there's like a what's the word? Kind of like a gap there. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to explain it. There's gonna be a gap. So when you were, developing, typically you'll have, of course, your face fused together. And that's why most people's faces obviously just look normal, if you want to word it that way, where they don't have any clefts in their face. With a cleft lip and palate baby, their face does not finish fusing, if you will, the entire way. So one of the more common ones, like I said, of course, is the cleft lip. So it's just like right here, usually very quick to fix with the surgery. And like I said, there's probably a lot of people who have them and you may not even know it because it's super, super subtle. And then another type of cleft that is pretty common as well, it's called the cleft lip and palate. And the palate would be referring to the roof of your mouth. And so that's where their mouth, or like the palate of their mouth, did not finish fusing as well. So sometimes you have like some oral things that might go on with that. Also, you may have some speech impediments or maybe like a little lisp. So that could sometimes be a little bit of a giveaway that somebody might have like a cleft palate, for instance. So those are the two very, like I said, more normal, if you want to word it, kinds. Those are going to be usually fixed pretty early on when the person is a little baby, have a couple of surgeries, and that's my cat. She's crazy. So those would be the two types of cleft lip and palates that you probably see the most and maybe are not even actually aware that you're seeing them. Now, when it comes to my cleft lip and palate, obviously it's a little bit different, a little bit more obvious, and that's because I have what's called a Tessier cleft lip and palate. Now, I do not recommend Googling this. No, because it is quite intense of a cleft lip and palate, and even my physician from Boston Children's, where I had most of my surgeries done, he was like in his 70s, I think, and he said that he had only seen about maybe several throughout his whole career. And that's what he does, is he works on craniofacial anomalies, all of that. So he definitely has seen his fair share of children with things going on. And so that's why, as you can see, my face looks a little bit more dramatic than you might see just on an average cleft lip and palate. And so that starts kind of the journey of surgeries. Whew, I'm out of breath. I'm chasing the cat. I'm not chasing her, but... And I apologize if the audio changed a little bit. I just turned on the AC. We're having an unusually warm day here in Virginia, which I'm loving. I'm going to take a walk after this. But anyhow, so if you hear some background noise, my apologies. It's the AC. Moving on with the start of my surgery. So let's kind of take a little walk down memory lane. So firstly, of course, as I mentioned in my previous video, with adoption, with me being in Ukraine, in the orphanage, I did have, I believe it was about 3 surgeries there in Ukraine. And those were very, very basic surgeries, really just to help me eat, help me, make sure everything was like functioning and pretty much like at least closed. So that way it's like, okay, my face was kind of a little bit put together, if you want to put it that way. But with cleft lip and palates, you'll notice this quite a bit. Usually the children can struggle to eat. Say if it's a baby, maybe the baby would be struggling to nurse or eat and digest, because like I said, with cleft lip and palates, it's going to affect the palate of your mouth obviously affecting your food, your nursing, etc. And so with that, they did want to correct some of those things right away. There's a piece of something I wanted to share. Before I was adopted, there was a family from Switzerland who had gone to Ukraine. They had adopted I think they adopted 2 kids. But when they were there, they saw me. They knew obviously that I needed help. And even though they couldn't adopt me, they decided that they were going to try to raise money to help me with my surgeries. And come to find out, you know, they raised the money, come to find out when they flew back that I had already been adopted. And so they decided, instead of just stopping the cause altogether, they started a foundation to help other kids who needed really life-saving surgeries. Things, you know, say for their heart, for their head, you know, for their back, their legs, a wide variety of things. And one really cool thing about this, and I'm super humbled and honored, is that they actually put the foundation in my Russian name. So it's called Les Amis de Svieta. I know I'm probably messing that up, but basically the Friends of Svieta, because Svetlana used to be my Russian name, Svieta for short. And so with that, it's been amazing that they have been helping children since that time. So it's about 20 years ago. I think the foundation is officially just hit the 20-year mark. They've been helping other kids get life-saving surgeries, and now they actually have even expanded as well from France to the United States, and then I think the initial branch was in Switzerland. So that has been super amazing, and that's really what kickstarted all of this with YouTube and just me really wanting to get involved even more than I had been. I always knew I wanted to give back to disabled kids, particularly, you know, maybe people who had different deformities, just giving back in any way I could. And so I thought I was going to do nursing for the longest time, and then just recently I've been thinking about, you know, wanting to start my own family and all of that. What is the best way I can contribute but still have time also for my family? And that's kind of what started this YouTube channel. And I would love to maybe, you know, start a store eventually where you could have maybe different t-shirts and gifts and things like that would be promoting the message of adopting and the message of, you know, loving those who look different than us. That's where maybe long-term I'll go. I really don't know. You know, with life it can take you a wide variety of ways, and so it's just being open to see what happens, but that's kind of the goal of where I would like to potentially end up. And so that was a side tangent. Back to the story at hand. Once I had my 3 surgeries, you know, of course I was adopted. Then we come to the time in America. And as you can probably guess, that's when a lot of the hard work started. And my parents are some of the most amazing, incredible people that I have ever known, because when they first adopted me, they didn't actually even know really what was wrong with me. They didn't know if I was born without a nose, or they didn't know what was happening. My mom even said that she thought maybe it would only be several surgeries and then I would be okay, you know, like lots of the other kids who have cleft lip and palates. She's like, I didn't even know. And I don't know what your faith is or what your belief about God or not a God is. For my family, my parents, they do believe in God, and really throughout this whole process they've really had to rely heavily on that and heavily on their faith, because my mom said God really knows what he is doing, because if I would have known what had to happen with your journey, how many surgeries you would have to have, how many visits to the hospital, how long the journey was going to become, she's like, I probably could not have handled it, you know, emotionally, mentally, just everything. Because when we, looking back, we're just like, oh my word, it was such a hard journey. But she says, God really knows what he's doing. He just gives you just enough for you to start taking those steps, but not so much that you get overwhelmed and you freeze and you just can't move forward. So I really have to mention my parents and thank them, because it takes a lot of guts, a lot of courage, and just a lot of faith to adopt a child, and you don't even really know exact challenges the child might have or just what hardships, you know, are in front of you. And so in a way that was God's mercy, but at the same time they didn't know what they had coming, let's just put it that way. From there, once I came here to the States, they started touring a bunch of hospitals. We went to John Hopkins, I believe Boston Children's. I don't even know about the other ones. Really just to consult with some of the best doctors possible to see what exactly, first of all, what was up with my face and what could be done to try to help me live the most normal life possible. Now, I think this whole topic about plastic surgery or craniofacial, surgeries, things like that, it's very interesting because we hear a lot about plastic surgeries, say from like celebrities where they're trying to improve an area of their body. But when it comes to something like this, you really are just trying to help the child live the most normal life possible and hopefully have less barriers with interacting with people, because you don't want to have maybe them struggling unnecessarily. But all in all, I do find it to be a really interesting topic, like to what degree do people want to take surgeries, how many, etc. Once my parents had visited the various doctors and consulted, it was decided that I was going to have most of my surgeries at Boston Children's, which was about 2 hours of a drive one way from my house. So in a way it was a blessing, because so many people travel from all around the world to come to this hospital, and I was privileged to live just 2 hours away, and I did not only all of my surgeries there, but also all of my dental work, because I ended up having like 3 sets of braces, because like I said, clefts affect your mouth as well. So that was definitely a privilege that I had because of how close that we lived. And then begins the surgeries. And when it comes to that, you become very comfortable with hospitals. Not that you become very comfortable with them or that you like them, but they soon become your second home, because you have to realize when it comes to surgery, you don't just show up when you have the surgery and then you leave and you're done. No, you have like a pre-op visit. Well, you have your visit to decide when you're going to have your surgery. And then you have your pre-op visit, and then you have your surgery, and then you have your post-op visit to make sure everything went well. So about 3 or 4 at least hospital visits for the surgeries, and we're not even talking about the dental work here that happened. And so just to give you an actual number, I believe I calculated this correctly, I had about 18 surgeries by the time I had turned 16, and I would have had my 3 sets of braces. When we're talking about traveling to Boston a lot, I'm not kidding. We really traveled a lot, and once again, many thanks to my parents, especially my dad. I remember for many of my dental ones, he would drive me, the 2 hours. He would take time out of his work day and then drive 2 hours back. So it was almost like a whole day trip. I think it was usually that would have to happen. Definitely many hours on the road. There are challenges associated with, like, how do you emotionally process getting ready for surgery? How do you tell your child, hey, you're gonna have to have another surgery? And it's not really a choice that you get to have a say in. How do you emotionally process that? I'm not going to super cover all those details in this video, but this is the point. I would say comment below. I would love to hear, of course, any questions, and this video would turn into a very long episode if I did not keep it short and kind of succinct. But please drop your questions below, and I would definitely feel free to make a part 2, and I probably will be sharing some of the challenges, maybe faced with other people, some of the challenges internally, etc. Now, maybe you wondered, what are some of the maybe unique challenges or difficulties that different people who have a cleft lip and palate might have? Firstly, of course, you have the question of, would I ever want to have any more surgeries? And kind of the whole question of, when is enough enough? Now, something that I think is really important to mention and just interesting is the fact that most surgeries are going to be done when you are a child. And the reason for that is going to be that you have the highest chance of recovery, and because your body is still growing, the fact that they did surgeries and maybe you have scars, your body is going to kind of grow and heal and incorporate that more, especially since it is on something like your face. It's going to incorporate that more, so as you get older, it's going to become less visible. Whereas when you have surgeries when you're older, your skin is not maybe still growing, not growing new cells as heavily because you're now an adult. And so with that, your scarring could show potentially more due to the fact that you're older now. And so that is a reason that you're going to have most of your surgeries when you're young, especially if you're a baby. Then you're really probably going to have the best chance of looking like you maybe never had a surgery. Because you're having these surgeries when you're a child, emotionally processing it can all be difficult, and I'm not going to really delve into that today, but that is just one of the factors there involved. And just to answer the question of maybe what would be some things that I would have maybe more surgeries on if I could, I would say probably one of the first ones, I know it sounds super cheesy, but it's my nose. Just because I feel like it just looks so interesting, And I don't really think about it much when I'm just looking at myself like this way, but then when I see myself on the side or whatever, I'm like, man, it really is my nose that makes me look different. And so just being really honest, and it is something that sometimes I tend to be a little bit insecure about, but it's one of those things. Thankfully I have a sweet husband, and I'm just learning myself to just become accepting of myself, and hey, if my nose looks a little funny, then so be it. But that is the question I usually get a lot, maybe whether it be from strangers or kids, like, hey, your nose is funnier, like, why is your nose weird? So that is definitely one of those things I would probably say was one of the things I was most insecure about. And then the next thing, it's kind of a little odd, but you'll be very appreciative for your tear ducts. Let me just say, after I tell you this, because with most people, you know, of course we all blink our eyes, and as we're blinking, the reason you do that obviously is so that way they don't dry out. And most people have this beautiful little system in their eyes underneath here that is kind of like a little cycle. And so your tears are kind of cycling through, which is amazing. And so you don't have your eyes just watering all the time, unless, you know, you have onions or something serious or you're crying, you know. For the most part, your eyes keep your tears where they belong. But for someone like me, unfortunately, as you can see underneath my eyes, that's where we've got all the action happening as far as my cleft. That has made it where I do not have that cycle of tear ducts in there. As my eyes are blinking, you know, of course, you've got your tears that are kind of building up. And most people's, their tears would just go right back into the tear ducts. Have a great day, no worries. For me, unfortunately, my tear ducts are messed up to the point that my tears have nowhere else to go but out. Literally meaning like I'm crying, if you will, on a permanent basis. And this is so frustrating because I cannot tell you how many times I've been in a conversation and all of a sudden you can feel it. And I think it's primarily in this eye, and I don't really try to do it too much on camera. I'll usually try to cut it out, but when it comes to a certain point, like after I've blinked so many times, it's like you'll see a little tear forming right there, and eventually it has to come out. Meaning like I'm like crying on a permanent basis because the water has to go somewhere. This can make for very interesting situations. So many times as a child, I got asked, are you crying? And it used to bother me so much because I'm like, no, I'm not crying. I'm not that emotional. It's just like my eyes have nothing to do with my tears. They just have to sit there or go out. And so many times I'll be having a conversation with a person, and all of a sudden, like I'm very good at picking up what people's vibes are now. All of a sudden they'll start looking very uncomfortable, and they'll stop looking at you in the eyes as much, and they'll start getting a little weird, and you're like, oh boy, I know what it is. It's that big tear right there. And it makes me look like I'm crying and I'm having an emotional moment when I'm not. It's just my eyes doing what they're doing. And other times, you know, you'll be talking and all of a sudden you won't even, maybe I won't even know. That's the worst. It's like sometimes you think that there's one there and there's not, and then other times you're like, oh, I'm totally fine, and then there's like a humongous tear, and all of a sudden it just like drops down your cheek in the middle of the conversation, and you're like, oh boy. You know, and so usually, and I think I can feel a tear in my eye right now. Usually when the tear comes, I just kind of go like this, you know, I'll wipe and I'll, you know, try to, so like I usually have like sleeves or something that I try to wipe my eyes on kind of constantly. So basically I have to constantly be soaking up the tears that are coming down my face. Otherwise I literally will be crying all the time. Like the tears will just run. I think it's particularly on this eye, and my face kind of gets irritated because obviously the salty tears. That is probably one of the biggest challenges, especially don't get me even started on sun and water, or sun and wind. So if it's sunny outside or windy, then I am really crying out them tears. It can make for some really awkward situations, and it's more of just a thing of like being self-conscious when you're with people. Nobody wants to be thinking about like the tears in their eyes. You're trying to focus on the person, try not to be self-conscious about this thing. You're trying to make them feel comfortable as well in the situation. So you've got all of that going on, especially if it's a stranger. They're already looking at your face and being like, oh, this person looks a little different or whatever. So that is one of those weird things that people might not know about. So as far as like my face goes, I think that is most of the things I would probably share right now. Of course, if you have any questions with any of this, please feel free to comment below. And while I'm talking about that, if you would, please hit that like button, because it does tell YouTube and the algorithm to share the love and share the message. So of course I'm super grateful for that, and of course subscribe. I would love that as well. Moving on to kind of the next part of this video, it's going to be just a little add-on, if you will, is another thing that a lot of people don't really know about is my beautiful arm. And I can't believe that I'm really sharing this because it is one of those things I would probably say is one of my biggest insecurities and one of the biggest things that I did not like about myself, and it's one of those things I hide the most. With my face, obviously everyone can see it. You can't really hide it, it's there. You just have to accept it. At least I do. So in many ways, it's almost easier to handle because it's like, well, my face is out there anyway, I just kind of have to deal with it. Whatever. With my arm, I can hide it, I can put it behind me, I don't have to deal with it. And I will just go ahead and pull up my sleeve. This is my left arm, of course. And so if you can see, I have a lot of different scars. Actually kind of funny, but it's even shorter than my other arm. Sorry if this weirds you out. But with this beautiful arm right here, what happened was a medical accident actually in Ukraine. And so one of my surgeries that I was having, of course you have an IV for your fluids, for your medicine, etc. Normally everything goes well because you have a nurse keeping tabs on you, making sure that you are doing okay. But unfortunately, this was not a good day apparently in the hospital, and they forgot about the IV or something like that, and your arm starts to fill with fluid. And this very briefly happened once in Boston. They immediately took out the IV, put a new one in, like, you know, they're super careful about this because it is pretty serious. Well, in Ukraine, it got so bad that when they came and they found me, I guess, they were initially actually going to amputate my arm. So they were like, because it was that serious, so like, we can either amputate her arm or we can try to save it. And thank God that they saved it, because, you know, obviously living with only one limb would have been much more difficult than dealing with this arm. But you know, the only way to save it was they had to just try to get the fluid out as quickly as possible. And because of that, you know, I do sometimes feel like, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of like phantom pain, where you sometimes kind of feel like a dull numb pain there, and I can't bend my arm either because of like tendons. I don't really know what happened. At this point, I'm just lucky to have an arm. But this, I think, really bothered me even more than my face, because it was one of those things like, I was like, look at my arm. It's so beautiful. I love my arm. I love my hands. And that was honestly one of the reasons that I did have my rings on my right hand, just because I'm like, I love my right hand. I think it looks so beautiful. Not that this arm, it has looked much better before. The scars used to be all red and all of that. So it was definitely not as like kind of camouflaged, if you will, before. But it's definitely been an area of one of those things where I have to learn to accept it. And it's one of those things I really hated my arm for a really long time, because I felt like it was like, God, I already have enough to deal with my face. Like, why did you have to mess up my arm too, you know? Yes, so that is literally what I have to do whenever my eye waters. I know, it's fantastic. But that was probably even bigger insecurity than my face, because it was one of those things I was like, this was not something that I was born with. Like, this is because of someone else's mistake. And so I'm super passionate about, you know, making sure, I can't even say that making sure, because I don't really have an impact, but it is one of those things that I'm like, when it comes to medicine, like, people's lives are on the line, and take it seriously and really just paying attention to detail, because it can make all the difference. Well, I say thank you so much for lending me your time this morning or this evening, whenever you're watching this, and just taking the time to check out this channel. It really is a work of love, and I really don't know where it's gonna go, because it's one of those things, life can take you so many different places, and at this point in life, I really do feel like this is, in a way, a season where I get to try out a lot of different things. I get to try a lot of wow. I get to try out a lot of different avenues and see, like, where are my gifts, you know? And I want to just help people, and hopefully, even if this story just helps one person to be more confident, be more secure in themselves. We all have those things that we're insecure about. We all have those things maybe that we don't like about ourselves, but once we start to embrace them, then it will help actually other people to embrace them as well. And that is what makes you you. That's what makes you unique And I've even asked Ben, my husband, I said, would you change this if you could? And he says, no, I wouldn't, because that's what makes you you. And that's what has made me the person I am. That's what's developed my character. That's what's helped me develop my mind, my heart. It really makes me me at the end of the day. I don't know where this channel is gonna go. I don't know exactly how it's all going to unfold, but that's okay. I think something that I'd like to get even more involved in is just helping people know life is such a gift. And we focus so much time worrying and having anxiety about what people are thinking about us, rather than just saying, hey, I've got one life. I have the opportunity right now to make something of this day, make something of this season, especially if you're a young person. Please hear me. Please, if you're a teenager, learn as much as you can. Don't be so worried about what people are thinking about you, and just figure out what is it that you're good at, what is it that you love, what motivates you, and how do you want to make a contribution. And once you start thinking bigger, thinking outside of yourself, you'll start to feel that purpose and that meaning inside of you, and it's really going to help you take your life to that next level and help you to take those steps that maybe other people are not as willing to take. So I really cannot thank you guys enough. I may cut back on this channel, I'm not sure yet. I may cut back to just maybe a couple videos a month, not sure. I really just want to have a balance. You know, I'm trying to grow as much as I can in this season, because it is such a developmental season for me personally, before life gets super crazy with kids and all of that, because once that happens, you can never go back. So they're an amazing blessing, but of course I want to use this season as well as I can with pouring into my marriage and just into myself as well. So that's kind of the little overview of my cleft, and now you know about my arm as well. And you can watch last week's video, or the week before. I'll have a couple of videos here somewhere and those are going to talk about adoption and some experiences there. If those are something that interests you, feel free to check them out. But until next week, next Saturday, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Make sure to enjoy the beautiful gift of life that you have today. Be thankful for something, thankful for a person, and show love to someone today, because that will make your life even more rich and more meaningful. So love you guys. Have an amazing day.